of the trees regarding our gender identity and sexuality. When there's no place like home, empty air, an empty establishment. Friends with Dorothy, fighting for your civil rights. Out on the cruel streets tonight.
I'm joined today by the Dublin author and, shall we say, personality as well, Eamon Somers, who's one of the organisers and participants in the forthcoming International Dublin Writers Festival. So, Eamon, welcome to Dublin City FM.
Thank you, Mick. It's a great pleasure to be here.
It's a delight, Eamon. Eamon, you'll notice at the very beginning, I called you author, even though you classify yourself as a writer. Now, my reasoning for that is, I remember I went to a talk once with the author, Amy Tan, who wrote The Joy Luck Club, which you may or may not have read. And Amy, she had just written her first book, and she said, before that, I was a writer. But once you get published, you're an author, and that takes you to a different level. So we have to say a big mazel tov and a big congratulations to you for Dolly Considine's Hotel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but it seems like a very reasonable position to adopt.
Well, it is, because technically we're all writers. That's
yes.
We're all writers, but until you're published, you're just a writer. Well, just a writer is being a bit unfair. But once you're published, they cannot take you away from you. You're an author, and that's the simple fact. And everybody who is an author deserves to be congratulated, even if they only sell one copy and give another one to their granny. So that's Eamon, I have to ask you, and the reason why I use the Hebrew expression of mazel tov is, I gather you grew up in Dublin's Little Jerusalem. Was it Clanbrassil Street or the South Circular?
Yes, I grew up in Clanbrassil Street, on lower Clanbrassil Street. More than half the shops on the street were catering to the Jewish community.
That would have been the 50s, though, Eamon.
Yes, yeah. I have to say that's my time.
Yeah. So I have to, again, I always say this to people, the 2 degrees of separation that we go on about for Dublin, it's 6 degrees in London where you're living at the moment, but in Dublin it's 2 degrees. I spent a great deal of my, shall we say, childhood in the 50s over in that part of the world because my grandmother lived on the Long Lane.
Okay.
Which would have been just around the corner from where you grew up.
Yes, I know it very well.
Not only that, we also had a shop in what was the Coombe. So these are, if you like, shared geographical memories.
So one of my first friend when I went to Warrenmount School when I was 5 was a guy called Dermot O'Leary, and his parents owned 2 shops on Mead Street.
Oh.
One of them was a cake shop and one of them was a butcher shop, and we were pals for a couple of months. I don't know how long.
Yeah. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't know if it was a Dermot O'Leary that it was certainly a Dermot that I knew who grew up on Mead Street. It's all very trendy now, Eamon, up there, which would have been quite different to what you had. We would have been, I'm assuming you were there in the 50s, is that correct?
Yes, I was born in 51.
Same as myself, Eamon, same as myself. So we had a draper shop just opposite the Coombe Hospital.
Okay.
And so Mead Street was just around the corner. So I'm very familiar with it. And it was a tough area to grow up in, was it not?
It was intriguing, I suppose, as well. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was exciting. There was lots going on, and there were plenty of shops. I mean, Francis Street, Sam's Junk Shop in Francis Street was one of my favorite places to go and just spend a half an hour rooting among the rubbish that he had on sale. And I bought my first motorbike in Francis Street.
City Spares.
It was a wonderful. Yes, that's right.
City's Bears, the Kerrigans,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. They, we lived in Fairview at the time, or at least just down from Ballybog Bridge. And the Kerrigans, apologies, they were our neighbours. We used to actually know them very well. We'd be in each other's houses. Although you've got a much more refined speaking voice now, Eamon, we tended to be characterised to a certain degree by our, if you like, our voices, our accents, if you like. Was that something that you were conscious of growing up? I certainly was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't understand why I don't have a flat Dublin accent and talk
Well,
like
you
that.
probably do when you get drunk now.
but but I don't. I mean, after I left, so it was low babies, high babies, and first class in the nuns in Warrenmount, and then I went to Sing Street, and in Sing Street we had elocution lessons. Miss Burke would come in and she'd say, "When you are speaking, be sure to use your lips and teeth and tongue correctly." So she may
we
have beaten
we
it
had
out of me.
we had something similar. We had a little tiny lady called Miss Burke, and we used to recite Oscar Wilde's "Selfish Giant." He was a very selfish giant, and of course we'd go outside and we'd still be Harry. Looking at that period, I mean, I just want to cast another memory back to you. I mean, there was a place down there because my mother used to work in the shop that we had. Um, there was a place that they used to call the Beano, although now they would probably call it the Beano. Were you a habitué of the Beano or the Beano, Eamon?
I went once. My older brother, who was a lot more adventurous than I was, took me there. He was 4 years older than me, and I must have been 5 or 6. And he took me to the Beano, and I had a bun and a cocoa or something.
A sticky bun and shell cocoa, and it was bloody horrible,
Yes.
wasn't it?
And when my mother heard that I went there, she was utterly horrified and forbade me to go there again.
Well, they used to send us down there. I don't want to digress too much, but they used to send us down there because obviously they didn't want us hanging around the shop that we had. And I'm not going to exaggerate here. I was terrified of the local kids down there. We must have been a bit effete by their standards. And they'd come up to you know, give me your bun or I'll beat your head in. And the shell cocoa was just horrible. It was just awful. I mean, it made Irish coffee look like, like gourmet coffee. But no, clearly, Eamon, we could probably talk a lot longer about growing up in inner city Dublin, but that's a story
We
for
could
another day.
we could just two small things. I learned to swim, of course, in the Ivy Baths, and
Fabulous, wasn't it? Mm-hmm.
and I made my first communion in Francis Street, and then later on I joined a camera club, and we used to meet on alternative Saturdays, I think, with the tap dancing girls in the hall next door to Francis Street Church. So yes, I'm very, very familiar with the area.
So you had a very full and social life, Eamon. Now, something I have to ask you, because Dublin in the 50s, as a member of the LGBTQ community, you would appreciate it wasn't the most LGBTQ plus friendly city in the sense it was, for argument's sake, it was illegal to engage in acts. It wasn't illegal to be gay. It was just illegal to, if you like, manifest it. What was your, shall we say, psychological state growing up at that time? Or did you feel like myself, I better get out of here?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I look back with kind of shock at how passive I was. I mean, I did attract quite a bit of attention from older gentlemen while I was very young. Both one of the Christian brothers in my school and my doctor and the priest who looked after the altar boys all showed what we might call an unnatural interest in me.
It's the unbearable burden of being a twink, Eamon.
Indeed, indeed. But So I struggled with to reject all that and to keep my distance and protect myself from all of that. And there was a football club which was local again, and a lot of the boys in Sing Street played in a soccer club. And there were rumors about the trainer, and so that was the kind of thing. The world was divided into people who fiddled with boys and everybody else.
Yeah,
And
well,
I felt I wanted to belong to everybody else, not
not surprising. Well, it's very interesting you should say that, because I've never identified with the word gay, because to me, gay was exclusive to man on man sort of thing. And but once the word queer was reappropriated, oh, that was like coming home as far as I'm concerned. But just I don't want to dwell too much on this, Eamon, but I just when they made a documentary a few years ago, I was part of that, and they were asking me about my memories of growing up then. And what I said was very clear, and it seems to be echoed to a certain degree in what you're saying, is that homosexuality was always queer. It was a mental illness as far as most of the people were concerned. It was fiddling with boys and a whole range of things. One of the reasons why, like yourself, I kept a low profile in that regard was because I always found it to be predatory. In other words, it was old men, it was priests, it was scoutmasters. So, like yourself, I just wanted to belong. I didn't, when you go somewhere else, it's a different matter. But that was something I was very, very conscious of growing up then, which I now think, well, that was the times. It wasn't necessarily, it's not something I'm going to blame myself for. Is that your memory, Eamon, I suppose?
It is. I mean, I didn't identify or even the first. I was in my mid-20s when and married with two children when a colleague confided that I was quite friendly with, confided in me and said, I'm bisexual. And I said, oh, if you're bisexual, I must be bisexual. Somehow it was the idea, it was like the diagnosis. It's like somebody getting a diagnosis. There's a name for what you're feeling. And suddenly, I never struggled to accept myself. I didn't understand who I was or what I was. But when somebody told me that this is what they were, well, then for a brief period, I identified as bisexual.
Sure.
And then once I began to explore my sexuality, and then it was different. I'm happy to
You
call
are who you
myself a
are.
gay man.
It's interesting you should say that, because I don't know if you were a hippie, Eamon, because I say to people, I was hippie aristocracy. But
Absolutely.
back in those days, and we're talking probably 1971 to about 73, 74. Everybody was bisexual. Nobody was gay. I can remember when Elton John was bisexual. And they were all bisexual at that stage. And I just want to share this. I don't know if it came into your consciousness. If you like, the light that shone into my psyche was in 1973. Lou Reed brought out an album called Transformer, and it just opened the doors of perception to me. It was just something I completely related to at the time, because I liked Lou Reed from the Velvet Underground. And this was, to me, another world that didn't exist in Dublin, but my gosh, I wanted to be part of it. And ever since then, particularly when I went to London, and then when I went to Australia, I was very much part of it. So it was it's a strange old journey people of our generation went on, wasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was about 3 years later, 75 or 76, when I first heard the Lou Reed album, and bought it indeed. And absolutely, it was life-changing. It's like seeing one of those movies that tells you your story. It's just changes your life.
Well, I can tell you now, Eamon, you can put it on when we finished here, and it still sounds as good as it did back then. Just about every song on it is a classic.
Yes, absolutely.
Eamon, let's move on to your time as a writer before you went off. Did you always want to be a writer, or did you Did you have dare I say it, a corporate job?
I did have a job. I in after I did the leave, I didn't get a very good leaving cert, so I couldn't do very much with it. So I got an office job eventually, and I stuck that for about 18 months. And then I decided to give it up and become a full-time writer and run off to London to be a writer. But it didn't work out, and I didn't actually leave the country at all. And I ended up, semi-unemployed, and I worked in a bar, which it was part of the inspiration for Dolly Considine's hotel. And eventually, then I I got involved in gay politics in the late 70s, and then in the mid 80s I emigrated to London with my partner and started work initially in Haringey in the lesbian and gay unit, which is a policy unit that upset Mrs. Thatcher so much. And then I got made redundant from that, and I joined the charity housing sector. So I started maintaining social housing, and then eventually started developing social housing. So corporate in one way, yes, but alternative corporate, hippie corporate, if you like.
I know what you're talking about, Eamon, because 3 weeks ago I was in Haringey because my cousin worked for Haringey Council for 20 odd years. We went over for my LGBTQ plus cousin's 70th birthday. We had a fabulous time. That was held in Haringey. I always saw it as a, if you like, as council went. It was quite a radical, but if you like, a practical radical council, which I always appreciated greatly. And of course, it had the one of my great likes in British politics. David Lammy was the MP for the area as well. So it's the 2 degrees of separation, Eamon, they're slinging, aren't they? We mentioned Dolly Considine's hotel. You managed to get that into print because of what we would call crowdfunding, which is slightly different from self-publishing. And I think, was it difficult to gather the support for that? How did the funding for that come about, Eamon? Because I'm really interested in sharing this with, shall we say, aspirational writers.
Yeah, so there are a couple of publishers who've adopted crowdfunding as a model, and they tend to what I might call publish books that are worth publishing, but somehow may not sell as many as they would like if it was going to. It's not going to be a blockbuster, so they minimize the risk by appointing the author as a fundraiser, and they set up the thing online for them, and they write to their subscribers and tell them about the book and hope that they will buy 1 copy or 10 copies and different little rewards that are given out. And eventually it takes 6. I mean, there some people are on for 2 years before they raise the full funds. I was lucky enough to be able to do it in about 7 months, I think.
Brilliant.
And once that started, then it goes in. They become like a traditional publisher. They appoint editors and designers, and the self-publishing you have complete control, but you don't know what you're doing. But there are then other companies who will sell you a package, but you lose a lot of control, and they're not terribly fussy about editing, or some of them are not terribly fussy about editing. So Unbound, my publisher, appointed a very experienced editor whom I worked with for several months, and indeed I continue to work with her in a private capacity now because I enjoyed working with her so much.
Can I ask you just, without tying you down, Eamon, just ballpark, what sort of figure were you looking at? Again, I'm trying to be helpful to aspirational authors.
Yes, so it's about, I think mine was about 7,500.
That's quite reasonable.
But that includes VAT, yes.
Yeah, but that's not bad. Dolly Considine's Hotel. I've only read the blurb, but it sounds terrific. I would describe it to a certain degree as comedic. What would you do? You know, it's very Dublin. It even reminded me to a certain degree of a 50s version of Roddy Doyle, or even a 50s version of perhaps Strumpet City, one of the classics of the genre. How would you describe it, Aidan?
Well, I think it's a bit difficult to describe it because it's set in two periods, the 1950s, but then again in the 1980s. So it's pre-Celtic Ireland, and there's a lot of misery around, but there's and quite a divided. So politicians and were having a good time, but they were dividing the population and society with a pro-life amendment, which was not the most important thing in the world, whereas getting jobs was the most important thing in the world. So, so babies and abortion and that kind of life kind of runs through it as a theme. So there are several themes, and the protagonist Julian, who grew up in Cabra, knows almost nothing about Irish history. So he does make a bit of an idiot of himself sometimes about the 1916 and the Civil War, and so he's ostensibly writing it. And yeah, there's quite a few characters in it, and he makes up stories about the people in the hotel and the politicians and the family, and they're not always flattering to them. And there's a bit about the IRA and the troubles in the north, and getting himself into trouble with some nasty people, and he has to look after himself and get out of Dublin.
I want to stop you there, Eamon, because to a certain degree, you've seduced me towards the book, and I'd like to come back at some stage, and perhaps we'll do another interview and review the book, because it sounds terrific if I can get a review copy of it. But for anybody listening to this who clearly thinks, yeah, this is something I really would like to get into, where can they get a copy?
Well, they should be able to get copies in Books Upstairs or Dubray's or
Okay.
the Gutter Books, but they don't. They tend not to stock it in on the shelf. You have to go in and order it,
Okay.
or if you go onto Amazon, you can
can get it
certainly
on
buy it.
Amazon or something like
And
that.
and it's on Kindle. There's a Kindle version which is
Okay.
$3.99
So
or something
the
like
book
that
is
at the moment.
called Dolly Considine's Hotel by Eamon Somers with one N and Somers. So look, we'll come back to that, Eamon, because I'd like to share it in a bit more detail with people, because we don't really have the time to do that today. But one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you today is because coming up in about a week's time is the International Dublin Writers Festival. I know that you're a participant in it. You're also a bit of an organizer. So tell us, what's the International Dublin Writers Festival, Eamon?
So it seems to be a festival aimed mainly at independent publishers and self-publishing authors. And it's for the writers to come along and do some classes or listen to presentations and people's experiences. And I wanted to see. I don't think there's very much LGBT books being published in Ireland at the moment, and I wanted to draw attention to that fact and see if we could improve on it. The GCN did an article way back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, in which they analysed books published in Ireland, LGBT. Why they asked the question: why are there not more gay men specifically writing gay novels? And I'm not sure that the situation has changed that much, or certainly in terms of them being published in Ireland. Yes, there are writers being published abroad, and I was curious as to why that was, whether they do it out of choice because they think it's a bigger market, there's better royalties, or publishers themselves are not interested in taking a risk on the writing.
If I could comment on this twofold. First of all, I think more women, LGBT women, are writing books because there's a great one that came out this year called Slant by my good friend Catherine O'Donnell, who we reviewed on this program. And what my experience is, and particularly if you're around in the next week or so, Eamon, is the Dublin Fringe Festival. And there's going to be quite a lot of LGBT work in that. So I suspect that it's not so much they're writing, they're just not writing novels. They're certainly writing poetry, as you know, from our great friend Mary Dorsey. They're certainly writing plays, but not as much novels, and I would accept that. So, first of all, Eamon, I gather it's in situ, the festival, but it's also online. Where is it going to be actually held? Is it in more than one venue or just in the one venue itself?
No, it's in Great Denmark Street, in the hotel in Great Denmark Street.
Which hotel is that, Eamon? I'm not sure.
Yes. Let me just double check the name of it.
Don't worry about it. I'll look it up and I'll let people know. And what's the dates that it's happening?
So it's Friday the 15th at 4 p.m.
Okay. So it's
now,
and does it go on? What dates does it go on for, Eamon?
It goes on for an hour. It's just an hour.
But
the conference itself goes on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
So it's on for the whole weekend. But I should point out that not all of the conference will be online.
No,
and
I appreciate that.
I understand that our session will not be online.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly.
Okay. Well, look, and where do people have to book? Is there an admission price?
I understand there is, but I've heard the price of €25, which does seem an awful lot to me just for one afternoon. But they have I think originally there weren't going to be very many events on the Friday, so it was people who book for Saturday can go free on Friday, and they didn't really address the issue of Friday only. So if people book for Saturday, I think they can go free on Friday.
Okay. What we want to do is to tell people that the best place to get information and, shall we say, find something that would be of interest to yourself is to go to the website, which is the International Dublin Writers Festival. Is that correct, Eamon?
That's correct.
Yeah. And I should also let people know, local people know, that two very, very well-known participants will be our great friend Germone, the filmmaker and lecturer, and of course what I call the immortal force of nature that is Mary Dorsey. She's with Mary. I only met her for the first time a couple of years ago at Pride, and to say I was blown away was just, to put it mildly. She is a phenomenal person altogether. So, and what will your contribution, Eamon? Just
can I first point out that Catherine O'Donnell will be in attendance. She may or may not sit on the panel, but she certainly will be in the audience and will be taking questions.
I like a great deal. When is Catherine going to be there?
At this session, yes, she's
Which
going
session
to be
is that? The Friday.
The Friday session, yeah, the 4 o'clock on Friday. She'll also be in.
Look, Catherine is she's a wonderful person. She's written an absolutely fabulous book in Slant, and I think everybody should go along just to say hello to Catherine, because she is really one of the most engaging people you could actually meet.
Yes.
Eamon, all we can say is thank you for your time today. We wish the festival the very, very best. We would hope this will make people keen to go along, particularly those who are aspiring writers, because you've achieved your dream. And I'd love to come back to you, grab a copy of Dolly, Considine, and let's talk and review it in the meantime. But Eamon Somers, it's been a delight talking to you today.
It's been a delight talking to you too, Mick.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Couldn't see the haunted forest for the trees regarding our gender identity.